We have Mana May on the podcast today. I've been so excited for this recording just to connect with you. You don't know this, but my first exposure to you, I should say, was many, many years ago. I saw just a video of you dancing in the forest. And I was like, who is this woman? What is she doing? And I was so captivated by the way that you were moving. And here we are many years later, and we're connecting, and we get to talk about something that I have been so curious about. And it has to do with how movement correlates with birth and birth outcomes and the birth experience for women, and something that I've just kind of like come to on my own path and journey. And a lot of women seem to be coming to, and it's not just like, hey, let me take this prenatal yoga class, or, let me do some stretches or these movements that are going to open up my hips. It's such a different it's a different aspect of movement. It's embodiment. And so I cannot think of a better guest to have on the podcast to talk about this. So thank you again so much, Mana, for coming on and making the time for this.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really happy to be speaking about this because it's something that I feel really passionate about. And, I've been through the whole process two times now. And so the first time I was like, that was awesome, but is that normal? And then the second time I was like, okay, there's something to this. And yeah, it's a topic I feel really passionate about, and I just want more women to be aware of it. And I think you really hit the nail on the head of it's not just about physical movement. We're really touching on something that is so much deeper and so much more holistic, of really using this modality to connect with that mind, body, spirit trifecta. And I think that's really the key here that we're working with.
In your intro, I talked a little bit about your background, but I would love for just to get your perspective on what brought you. I know you're a dancer, but not all dancers come to this space that you're at. So what really brought you to foster this space for yourself and for your kids and for your family?
Yeah, I mean, it's really been my whole life journey. I started dancing when I was 3 years old. I studied classical ballet, and that was really my path from the very beginning. Was I was a classically trained dancer. I went to university for ballet, modern dance. I was dancing professionally right after college, and during that time, I studied different somatic dance techniques. I did a lot of dabbling in different kinds of technical dance. And then in my 20s, I found transformational festivals. I found meditation. I found, yeah, curiosity in spirituality, and also psychedelics and plant medicines and ecstatic dance. And so that kind of got brought into the mix of an interest in my own personal development, my own spiritual expansion, and just a deep-rooted obsession with dance. And so it was very natural that those two things came together, or I guess those more than two, many different aspects came together. And there was a point in my life after, actually already after my son, my first child was born, where I discovered that movement really was a healing modality for me. It was my therapy. I would go to ecstatic dance and lay on the floor for an hour and just process all of my emotions, and it was really effective, and it really, like, I would say it saved my life. And I think I realized a big piece of why I could drop so deeply into that space was because of my vast technical background, of the understanding of the body and how to move the body and the different options and just the movement vocabulary I had to be able to express all different kinds of emotions. I'm a very curious person, so that just continued to like set me on this path of curiosity of, okay, what is this? Why does it work? And can this be accessible to more people? Because I know that I'm not the only one that could benefit from this.
There is something, and I feel like there is kind of this wave of everyone understanding that it's we cannot heal just by talk therapy and just by going into our intellect and going back into our history, our past from like a story narrative perspective. Like the body, like we are human, and so there is the mind, body, spirit, energetic connection as you're talking about. And so beautiful how you had this very kind of technical past with dance, and you, it sounds like you got so expanded when you began to explore different ways of moving and healing through movement. And because ballet is so, I don't want to say it's beautiful and it's flowy, but it's kind of rigid in a way, right? It's like this point and here, and you must be aligned fully, and just to blossom as a dancer and as a human, as a woman through that way is so lovely to hear. Mana, before we get started, I just want to, for the listeners, define embodiment,
Oh my gosh.
if we can.
Yeah, I laugh because it's such a small word to encompass such a large concept, but the easiest way that I've been able to find to describe it is when there is no differentiation between what is inside of us and what is outside of us. And it's the experience of the body, the physical body, becoming a bridge between all of the energy inside, all of our potential, even all of our ideas, all of our dreams and desires and feelings, and what we're actually creating and manifesting in the physical world around us. And so again, there's this clear stream of I feel these feelings, I feel this energy, I have these ideas and, creative flow, and then I can actually manifest that into the physical world around me. And so again, the body really is the bridge between that experience. And when we can have a strong connection with our bridge, with our body, when we can tune in more deeply to the energetic impulses inside and have the tools to know how to actually bring that into the physical world, this is when we're living from a place of being embodied.
That is a beautiful description and not what I expected, to be honest. Yeah, so that's a beautiful thing, very expansive for me. And again, before we dive into your birth stories, which I'm so curious about, why do you think there's such a focus on feminine embodiment right now?
We live in a very masculine world. That's just the way it is. It's very goal oriented, it's very linear, there's lots of structures. Even if we look at some spiritual practices like yoga, yoga is actually also very masculine. It's all about lines and discipline. And so there's already an imbalance of we're so focused on the masculine way of living, and even for women, that the feminine has been quite shut down. And when I speak about that, I speak about it more from an energetic side of it's not considered, it's kind of looked down upon to not do anything or to just relax or to like not be in the grind of going, going, going. And yet that is the nature of the feminine. The feminine is in the moment. It's the right now. There's no goal. There's no climbing the ladder. It's just being immersed in the present moment and being in the fluidity, being in the creativity, being in that very non-linear space. And that's not really celebrated in our culture. And so there is an imbalance. And so the reason that we focus on feminine embodiment is to try to bring that balance back into play. And the feminine is, you can't separate it from embodiment because, again, the feminine is the energy, it's the life force energy, it's the creativity. And so the only way for us to really be living embodied is to have a deep connection with the feminine so that that can come through. And that power of manifestation is also an element of the feminine. So within this work, there is the focus on the feminine, but at the end of the day, it's about the balance. They need each other. I always use this analogy of the river. The river banks are the masculine. It's what creates the structure, what creates the direction. It's the container that holds the water, which is the feminine. And without the riverbanks, there would just be water everywhere and it'd be a big mess and the water would have no power. And so it really is about coming into balance. But because the feminine has been so disconnected from, there's first the invitation to really connect with what that is for each of us.
Yeah, I love that analogy and goes back to my training in traditional Chinese medicine with yin and yang and how the balance is so necessary. So I'm curious, like for men as well, like they also need to get in touch with their feminine nature as well. This is not only calling women, although there is that calling. Do you work with men as well, or is it mostly women that you work with?
I love to work with women. I think women only spaces creates a level of safety for women that is not necessarily achievable for some women because there's a lot of trauma women have experienced with men. But you're absolutely right. This work is for everyone because the feminine energy, the feminine expression is just our rawness of expression. It's the emotion, it's the feeling, it's the fire, it's the passion. And those qualities absolutely need to be nurtured in men as well, and their capacity to express themselves freely. So this isn't just about, the soft and the sensual and that side of the feminine. This is also about just the rawness of our human expression and being able to find more freedom in letting that out.
Coincidentally, this week, it's so funny. I knew that this podcast was, we're going to be recording, and my toddler, she's 3 years old. And I was listening to a podcast on parenting. They were talking about what to do when your toddler hits you. And I was like, very smugly, like, oh, my toddler doesn't hit me. That same day, she got upset at me and like literally with claws scratched me across both cheeks. I put makeup on for this recording, but you can maybe like still see. I literally have like she broke the skin. I was bleeding and she roared when she did that. And I was like, of course I was like, "Oh, that's not okay. You can't scratch." But I was also like, "Damn girl, way to embody your raw feminine essence."
Yeah,
I was proud.
absolutely. I remember when my son was about that age, he'll be 9 next week. But when he was about that age, I could also see this little wild animal wanting to come out. And we used to do this thing where when he would get really frustrated, I would be like, okay, do you want to roar together? And we would just start roaring. And he had this like scary face he would make, and he would like make himself into this little animal with claws, and we would just roar. But it's so true, like they are little wild animals until they learn that they have to fit into these structures of, being a human. And it's so beautiful to see that. I see that in my little baby girl now. Sometimes I look at her, I'm just like, you are a little animal. It's so true.
Let's continue on that theme of connecting to our inner animal because we are mammals. And I think sometimes we need to reframe how we look at the birth process to see ourselves as mammals. Just with that being said, I'd love to just hear your birth stories and you can start wherever you want. You can start from like pregnancy, you can start from preconception, wherever you want.
I will just say generally, so I've given birth twice. Both were at home, both were natural, both were what I would consider perfect births, no complications, just very smooth. With my son, when I got pregnant, I knew nothing about home birth. I knew nothing about natural birth. I just knew that I really hated hospitals. And everything inside of me was like, there is no way I want to give birth in a hospital. It just doesn't. And I didn't really know why. It just was this feeling and this idea. And so that really was what started me on the whole path of doing my own research, educating myself, learning about home birth, learning about natural birth, all these things that were not taught. Right? It's like up until then, my ideas of birth was what I saw in movies of women just like screaming, being frantically towed into the hospital, and just like chaos, basically. And I think for many women, that's what we have. That's the education we have. Birth is painful, birth is hard, birth is chaotic. It has to be done in a hospital. So it was really beautiful that I kind of was forced to do my own research and really go into that understanding. And it just opened up such an incredible world of information of just being like so many things that make sense that I just didn't know about, of really connecting with what birth is, how it's literally the most natural thing ever. Like our bodies are made to do that. And just the whole idea of, the environment that we want to be in order to birth, where we feel safe, where we feel comfortable, where we feel familiarity around us. And yeah, that just brought me down this whole rabbit hole of really being passionate about the idea of home birth. So the birth of my son was beautiful. The pregnancy was very smooth. I was going to ecstatic dance twice a week through the entire pregnancy until the day before he was born.
Oh my
Like the day
gosh.
before he was born, I was there, and I think it was the day after my due date, maybe. So I danced through my whole pregnancy and just kept the body open and fluid. I really felt that that was such a big part of why that birth was so smooth. Again, back then I had very little understanding of what was actually happening from a feminine embodiment perspective. I was just like, okay, this is cool. I feel like this is really helping. And I was really listening to my body. There was a point during the pregnancy where I just wanted to be upside down all the time. I was just obsessed with handstands. There was a point where I needed to slow down, and I had a completely offhand pregnancy. So I never had any tests, I never had any ultrasounds. I really wanted to just trust my body. Again, through all the research and also my experience with movement already, I was like, my body knows how to do this. I don't need to be told by someone else what's happening. I really, really trusted that my body would guide me. And so the whole pregnancy was focused on learning to listen, listening to my body, listening to the cues, and really trusting that. And also rewriting my understanding of pain because I knew I wasn't going to take medication. I knew I was going to do it naturally. And so I was like, okay, I have to learn how to deal with these sensations. And that was a big piece, was rewiring my understanding of what pain was and understanding that pain is when our body is being harmed. It's that like emergency signal from the body of being like, hey, something's wrong. And that's not what's happening during birth. The sensations we're feeling are supposed to be there. They're good. They're intense, but it's the body stretching and expanding and creating space for the baby to come out. So that was a big piece, was just removing that word from my experience of it's not pain and really welcoming sensation. So the pregnancy with my son, I spent doing a lot of work, doing a lot of meditation work, doing a lot of just re-understanding of sensation, connecting deeper with my feeling body awareness, being with my physical body. It was a very, very proactive pregnancy because I was just a hard no on having a normal Western birth. And it was beautiful. I learned so much, and I'm really grateful for that experience to be able to just expand myself in that way because I was very attached to having a specific experience during birth. So
Hmm.
again, the birth was very smooth. I had a water birth at home. I did have a midwife there, but she kind of just hung out on the couch, and I was like, I want to do it. We want to do it ourselves unless there's something, really going wrong that you need to intercept. Please just let us do it by ourselves. And yeah, it was very smooth.
What was her response when you said that to her?
She was totally on board. And that was in the initial interview with her, that was something that we said right off the bat, is we really want to do it by ourselves. And we wanted someone that would allow us to have a hands-off pregnancy, who didn't want to do any, would allow us to not do any of the testing and all of that. And so that was, yeah, just making sure again that the people that were in the birthing space were really aligned with that
The
vision.
big difference.
Yeah, and that's a big piece of taking our power back, realizing that we can be the ones in control of our birth experience. We don't have to hand that over to other people or doctors. And, you know, again, like my deepest trust is in myself. It's in my own body. It's never going to be more in someone else because they're not inside of my body. They don't have that communication with my baby too. That was a big piece of really understanding that me and my son were in this process together and speaking to him during the labor and, feeling him moving through. And because I wasn't on any numbing or medication, I could feel exactly where he was at every moment. No one had to tell me when I had finished dilating. No one had to tell me when he was like starting to move through. I was like, I can feel it. I could feel his little feet pushing against my rib, trying to make his way down. And it really was the first moment that I felt so incredibly connected to my body. Like, even after all of the embodiment work I had done, that moment of giving birth to my son, me and my body were just in the clearest communication. It was really, really incredible, a really incredible moment of transformation. That was the first birth, and it absolutely changed me. It really cemented in that belief that our body is so intelligent and we can trust it, and all we have to do is listen to her and she will guide us. And a big piece of it is just getting out of our own way, getting out of the mind's way, and just really learning to listen and to trust her. And I understood after that that it wasn't just isolated to a birthing experience. This is how we can move through life, how we can make decisions to really listen to the body and allow her to guide us and tune into that insane intelligence of the body. And so it was a really big rite of passage to, again, make me more curious of this work, of this embodiment work and the movement work, and also my deep connection to dance and understanding how that was such a big piece of what helped me move through that experience with so much trust and presence and awareness, and to have that beautiful experience.
Oh my gosh. As you're speaking, I can feel just my nervous system like settling and settling and settling more because there are so many truths just transmitting from your story. Like every birth story transmits this truth, this wisdom out into our field, and it's contagious. So every woman who is listening to your story is going to feel that. And if she's pregnant, which it's a lot of women preparing for birth listening, you know, they're going to feel that. They're going to connect to their baby on a deeper level. So just enjoying this, savoring every nugget as we go. But I did want to ask a couple of things. You said I wanted to shift my relationship to pain, and you're like, I just wanted to get that out of my vocabulary. So how did you change your vocabulary around sensation and pain?
The first piece was just the word. Like, words are so powerful, and really understanding that word of pain, that it means something's wrong, and disassociating that from the birthing experience. Because again, the sensations happening in birth when you're dilating, it's not wrong. It's exactly what's supposed to be happening. And the big piece of that is when we feel pain, we contract, we squeeze, we try to like get away from it by closing the body and squeezing the body. And it's very unnatural to do the opposite, which is what you need to do during birth, which is actually to relax the body and to open the body. So, a big piece of the practice for me was when I feel intense sensation, instead of squeezing or contracting, to actually consciously relax the body, to consciously release tension from the physical body, to feel relaxing in my jaw, to just relax my shoulders, to feel relaxation through the muscles, and to try to open more. And so this is actually something we can practice in life too. Whenever we feel conflict or negative emotions or a trigger, what do? We We squeeze our jaw, we hunch our shoulders, we contract. And that actually is not serving us because it's preventing us from being able to, again, access that wisdom of what the body wants us to do. Emotions are invitations from the body. They're helping us, they're trying to help us guide us towards something, away from something, into expansion. And when we just shut off and try to resist them, we're not allowing that intelligence to come through. And so that was a big practice of, okay, how can I, instead of squeezing and contracting when I feel something difficult, how can I actually relax and open so that I can access more choices? I don't just have my reactive patterns, but I can make a new choice of, where that takes me. And so during labor and during birth, this is such a big piece. What's going to help the baby come through when we like squeeze and tighten everything? Probably not. The baby's going to feel a little bit squished. We can support the baby coming through. We can support the birth by relaxing, relaxing. So every time we feel a surge or a contraction, actually consciously relaxing the body. And so the birth of my son and of my daughter, they were meditations. They were 10-hour meditations of every time I feel a surge, relax, relax, and really go into that conscious meditation of relaxing the body and focusing on that. And again, this is a life skill. I feel like this one skill has just shifted so much of my life trajectory of being able to stay open even in the face of conflict, so that we have more choice and we can stay in that fluid place even when things are feeling difficult. Just like the river, right? Just allowing that flow to continue even when things might feel rocky or turbulent.
Yeah, it is that initiation into motherhood. Motherhood isn't always going to be rainbows and butterflies and unicorns, right? And so these skills that we get in labor and birth, they're necessary for motherhood. And it saddens me that our society and our culture is so afraid of that experience. But this is kind of the shift, the wave that's happening of people kind of being more curious about like what does it mean to see birth through the lens of it being sacred
Yeah.
versus an emergency.
Absolutely. It's not our fault that we're so scared of it because, again, the education's not there. Just what we're talking about here, it's like the reason we're scared of it goes so beyond just the experience of birth. It's because we are scared of our own bodies. We're disconnected from our bodies. We've spent our whole life numbing and detaching to try to, protect ourselves and just survive life. And so, of course, we're scared because there's no trust there. There's no trust in our own body. There's no feeling of safety. And so, how can we trust that we're going to be able to have this intense birthing experience when that hasn't been cultivated already? And this is why at the beginning, what you were saying of this isn't just about birth. This is about cultivating these qualities, these skills, these connections to ourselves throughout our entire life, not just to serve us during birth, but to serve us at every moment of our life.
So well said. I'm curious, before we move on to your next birth
Mhm.
experience, I'm curious how you moved during your late, like when labor started, how that started for you, and what that looked like. I know you mentioned it was a water birth. So if you can take us through what that kind of looked like visually.
Yeah. The funny thing is that I had an idea, right? I had an idea of what I was gonna do, what it was gonna be like. I had my big birthing ball. I was like, I'm probably gonna be sitting on it, spiraling my hips and just moving. And I definitely had an idea. And
As
it
we
was
all do.
yeah, it was not what happened at all. I literally spent 10 hours in complete stillness sitting on my bed with my eyes closed, not moving. And I did a couple times during it. I remember, I mean, this was, nearly 9 years ago, but I remember being like, oh, I should, get up and try to move because that's going to feel better. And every time I would try to move, my body was like, no. And what it was that, again, I really was tuning into this need to stay completely relaxed. So every time I tried to do something that required force or muscle, there's a contraction there to have to move the body. And my body immediately said no. And so I literally spent the entire labor just sitting on the bed in meditation with my eyes closed. And every time a surge would come, I would tone. I would have a deep toning noise and just allow sound out and, imagine that clear tunnel opening. And it was to the point where, I could feel when I had finished dilating, I could feel that the pushing was going to start. And my partner, he was like, if you don't move to the pool right now, we're gonna have a very clean pool and a very messy bed. And I was like, okay, I get it. And so we got me into the birthing tub, which is right at the foot of the bed. So I just kind of had to like fall into it. And right after I got in, my water broke and my son was out 10 minutes later, and that was it. But
Wow.
it was so funny that I had an idea and it just my body just wanted something completely different, which I understand and it makes sense. That expectation.
Yeah. And even as you said that, I was like, I'm in shock. Can't believe that. You just don't know how your body is going to respond in that moment. And so there needs to be this mental and emotional flexibility to what we are attached to, what outcomes we're attached to in birth, because we really don't know how it's going to go. But that requires all of the pre work that you did before the onset of labor. And you said throughout the pregnancy, you got into meditation and just going deeper and deeper and deeper. And you were able to just listen to what your body needed instead of saying, I need to be on the birth ball because so and so said this is helpful for opening up my hips and the birth canal. You just listened. And that's what we're called to do in the birth experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's good to have all the options, to know all the options of what we could do and the different tools to support us. And then at the end of the day, just have this toolbox and really be listening into the body. And even though I was in stillness, I really believe that all of the movement work made that possible because again what we're practicing in the movement is how to stay relaxed and open even when there's an intensity or emotion happening, whether that's physically externally or the motion and intensity of what's happening inside. How can we not close? How can we stay open even when things are swirling outside of us and inside of us?
A big life skill in motherhood. How can
Yes.
we stay
Yeah.
centered amongst the chaos? I would love to hear what those first moments were like when your son emerged.
For those who have given birth, especially given birth naturally, I'm sure you know that moment where they actually come out is like the best, biggest high it like you can ever experience. Just the flush of hormones and just the relief that they're out. And yeah, that moment, I'll never forget that feeling of just the most pure, ecstatic joy. I think really just being able to be there for that experience, to be present, to have that connection to the body and the awareness and the baby and was really significant. And also, my partner was in the tub with me and his hands were the first hands that touched the baby. And also just to have that really beautiful bonding experience for the father with the child as well. And then I got out of the tub and slopped back onto the bed and didn't leave the bed for like 2 weeks. And there was nowhere to go, nothing to do. The placenta stayed connected to him for, probably a few hours. There was no rush. The midwife was there, and it was just such a peaceful experience. And yeah, I really wish every woman could have that experience and deserves to have that experience. And of course, all births are different, and birth is the biggest moment of surrender possible. I think, because again, we have no idea and we really have to release our expectations. But like we're talking about here, there is so much we can do before, and not just right before, but like in life before to help cultivate that experience for us.
Yeah, going into the body, especially for women, which I'm sure you've worked with women who have experienced trauma, specifically around our pelvic region. Working beforehand, preconception, throughout your pregnancy to process some of that because it comes out in the birth experience. And we're not sure how we're going to respond. If a sensation triggers us, we're going to go into that fear state, right? And our body's going to want to go into protection, but we're being very much called, as you keep talking about in birth, to experience that intensity and still open up,
Hmm.
still tune in. And so I'd love to hear your take on that before we move on, if you have worked with women who have experienced that or not.
Yeah. I think the thing is that we call practices practice for a reason. Within the birth experience, we can't just expect that we are gonna have these beautiful, expansive, connected births. I mean, some women do who are lucky without any sort of practice before. And especially if you know that you have trauma or different kinds of trauma, especially around the pelvis and the womb or sexual trauma, then we have to work with that because, like you said, that's going to come out during the birth experience. I like to keep taking this also beyond the birth experience. If we want to feel just in life in general, able to be expanded and open and curious and feel as much pleasure as possible and lean into new experiences, we have to really cultivate that skill and meet whatever is there that's blocking us from being able to open. And
Hmm.
so this isn't just about supporting us during birth. This is about supporting us in having a liberated, expanded life. And I think when we're talking about acute traumas, there's so much fear there. And it's totally understandable. And again, the fear is there because we just don't have the education on how to work with it and how to feel safe and how to trust. And like we talked about at the beginning, talk therapy can only do so much. We hold so much in the physical body, in the actual fibers of the body. We hold that trauma. And so, if we're not working through the body, if we're not working with the body, we're never going to fully heal from those traumas. It's always going to be stuck in the physical body, and we're never going to be able to trust and feel safe there. And so, doing this work of really starting to connect deeper with the body to understand that there's a process, just like, a traumatized dog. There's a trust building process. You can't just like go in and be like, hey, what's up? It's like, okay, we really, really have to take it slowly, slowly, build that trust through the gentleness, through just the presence. And it's not a quick fix. And unfortunately, I think in the world and society, we are getting like more and more into this idea that everything should happen really fast immediately. And we're losing connection with the fact that we need slowness. We need to really work over time on practicing mastering our own connection to ourselves. So, yeah, I don't specifically work with people with trauma, but at the end of the day, everyone has trauma, whether that's acute or subtle or just childhood patterns or whatever. Everyone has some sort of trauma. And again, the trauma is what prevents us from really being able to be open because there's not a sense of safety there. So we're still squeezing, we're still contracted. And so all of this work is about reestablishing that trust, reestablishing the safety in our body, and learning the tools on how to meet the trauma that's held in the body, which is going to be energetic, emotional, and to be able to allow that energy to express out finally, which is what it wants to do. Trauma is trapped energy that wants to complete its cycle. And so learning how to create a container for ourselves where we can lean into opening to feeling more and expressing.
I think trauma is maybe a part of this experience, a part of the life experience. Like, just you can have like the most amazing parents and community, but just being like a human on this planet right now, there is that sense of trauma of what's going on in other parts of the world even. And so maybe it's a part of our experience because it calls us to reach out in different ways to our community, to practice different modalities and find what really works for us, what doesn't work for us. Yeah, it's just like you said, at the end of the day, everyone experiences it. And then we want to complete this cycle, that trapped energy to move through us.
Being human is really complicated.
It
It's
is. Yeah.
very complicated. We have a lot we're working with. And what I would love to see in the future is we're talking a lot about the lack of education, the lack of education of how to be with our emotions, how to express our emotions, how to welcome them, how to feel safe. There's always going to be things that happen in life that are challenging and confronting and can create trauma, but if from a young age we learn how to express and move energy and we understand the importance of that, then we're not going to carry that for the rest of our lives. And things, just like in the animal world, something traumatic happens to an animal, they shake it off, they move on. It's like they understand how to complete that energetic process through the physical body. It's not something that we've been taught. We've been taught just to lock it in and shut it down. And then we're carrying that for the rest of our lives for a lot of people. And so I think a big piece is that education of teaching our children, just like we're doing with our kids of, okay, let's just roar, like let's get that energy out and allow it to come out and not shutting them down all the time. And this starts from when babies are crying and you're shushing them and you're telling them not to cry or you're sticking pacifiers in their mouth. It's already teaching them that that form of energetic release is not welcome and it's not okay. And so there's a really, really big rewiring that's needed of our understanding of how to work with emotional expression to prevent us from, carrying these traumas through our adulthood.
As you were speaking, I just saw the full cycle of you from preconception throughout your pregnancy, expressing yourself through ecstatic dance, communicating with your growing fetus that this is what humans do. And then throughout your birth experience, you toning and allowing that vocal expression to come out and that imprinting onto your child. And then as you mother them throughout their early years, letting them know that's okay to express yourself and cry and roar and scream and get into their animal bodies. It's full circle. The way that you birth and mother your children has such big ripple effects moving forward for humanity.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important for us. I mean, women, pre-pregnancy, pre-giving birth to start doing that work on ourselves because we obviously can't pass that on to our children if we're not, working on that embodiment piece on ourselves first. I really took that invitation. I really felt that having children was such a big responsibility for me to continue my own healing journey, to continue connecting with myself, creating more safety and freedom in my own body so that I could pass that on to my children, not just by, what I'm telling them they should and shouldn't do, but just by the way that I live. Like our children are watching us all the time. They're learning how to be human from watching us. And so just by us being more embodied, by being more expanded and empowered, that is the biggest medicine for our children of being like, okay, this is what it's like. This is what's normal. It's normal to roar. It's normal to express ourselves. It's normal to cry and really teaching them what's normal.
This is the curriculum. I'm ready for your second story whenever you're ready.
Okay.
I'm in suspense.
So my daughter, Lily, will be 10 months this month.
Congratulations.
Thank you. The birth of my son felt so perfect that there was two things. One, I was like, okay, let's just do it exactly the same. And it's a different father. I have a different partner, so obviously it's already different. And there's the part of me that was like, let's just do it exactly the same. And then there was this doubt and this fear of, is it possible to have two perfect births? And I really like had to work with that fear through the whole pregnancy of being like, can that happen? Like, can I get lucky twice and have that perfect birth? So it was really interesting. It was almost a decade later, and I just noticed how that brought a bit more fear into my mind during my pregnancy, even though I had also done so much more work. I was so much further in my embodiment path. I was so much more educated on somatic healing and understanding what was happening of that. I really noticed I had to battle my mind a lot more. So that was an interesting piece that came up for me. And a lot of the pregnancy I spent working with my mind actually this time, and just being with the fears and breathing through them, and just holding the vision. And so I'm just realizing this right now, actually, as I'm speaking about it, that the first pregnancy really was about working with this body connection and the sensations. And this pregnancy was a lot more of me working with my mind and trying to bring that into harmony with the body. And yeah, just to meet those voices that were coming up with compassion and yeah.
The
So,
voices of doubt.
oh my gosh, the voices of doubt, and they can get so loud, can't they?
Indeed.
Yeah. And I think they're valid. I really feel like even the voice of the critic is there to support us. And it's always a moment for us to sit with it and what is it that you're trying to tell me? And I've seen with my work too, that's a voice of the critic that comes up a lot, of imposter syndrome, or who are you to be doing this, or not good enough. And I've always taken that as a moment to look at my own integrity and be
Mm.
like, okay, well, who am I to be doing this? What are my values? Am I in integrity? And so I think even those voices of the judging mind, there's nothing wrong with them. They're there to serve us, and we get to actually listen to them and have a conversation with them. And I think that's a much more, again, empowering way to meet ourselves versus then just trying to lock them out or resist them. So,
Mm. Such a good
uh,
reframe because we always think of like, oh, that's just self-judgment and self-criticism and like I'm getting into a negative loop and I need to just ignore those voices. But yeah, like what we've learned from parts work is that those are there to protect us as well. They're a
yeah.
part of our protective mechanism that we've learned since childhood. So let's listen to what they have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we start getting into the shaming of those voices, then, we're not serving ourselves. Healing means to come to wholeness. And so that shaming of our inner critic is still separating ourselves
Mm.
and projecting a part of ourselves. And so, no matter what there is, and we can look at this with emotions, with grief or pain or rage, or we can look at it as the voice of the inner critic, we get to welcome everything in and just be with whatever is there and bring ourselves to wholeness in that way. Baby girl. This girl, she's a powerful one. I mean, her spirit came to me probably 4 years ago. I could just feel this entity there, a little girl. She gave me a name, which ended up being her surname that we gave her. She has her own surname.
I didn't know you
And
could do that.
yeah, I found that
Cool.
out with our son too. So both of my children have their own last names, different.
Wow.
Yeah. You can name your kid whatever you want. It's pretty
Change in
cool.
their birth certificate tomorrow.
So she's been there, and she's just been kind of hanging out, but a very strong presence. And I went through some different relationships and partnerships, and at some point I was like, if I don't have another baby by the time I'm 37, like that's it. I'm done. I'm just like, it just wasn't supposed to happen. And she was born like exactly a month before my 37th birthday. So she just like got right in there. She was like, wait, I'm coming. Hold on.
If that's the contract, here I am.
But her spirit was really powerful. And, when it was time for her to come through, there was a lot of prayer, there's a lot of intention. I have like a tattoo on my leg that was part of helping call her in. I was painting every month while I was bleeding. Like, she really lit a fire of creativity inside of me even before she was born. And so again, this deep connection with this being and knowing that we're working together through this process, that she's chosen me, and it's my responsibility to really try to create this smooth path for her to come through. But she was coming to me in dreams. She gave me her middle name in a dream. And yeah, she was a little phoenix. She was my little white phoenix, and she was just there, so strong. So
I just had,
she,
sorry to interrupt. I interviewed Joel Schaefer on the
Mhm.
podcast last week, and he talks about The Shining. Like, I know there's the movie The Shining, but he talks about how in Toltec shamanic culture, when a spirit or a being chooses the mother, they call it a shining. And
Mm.
then they guide that mother to the father. And without a doubt, he says the mother always goes to the father in whatever way it needs to happen.
Yeah, I believe that. I really believe these children, they are just so wise, and they really are our guiding lights. And between my son and my daughter, there was, 8 years there. And I really felt like my son was just guiding me through so much of my life. I really think that he was a big part of everything I've created, all of the abundance I've called, and everything I've experienced. Like, he was such a guiding light for me and such an anchor, continuously inviting me to come back to myself, to not abandon myself, because I had to show up for him and I had to shepherd him. And that was such a big anchor into continuing to show up and do my best and be a good mom. And I just want to be a good mom, and what can I do to support that process? So yeah, I really believe in the power of our children, and that birthing experience. Again, it's such a big, in my opinion, responsibility for us to really support them in the way that they come to the earth, and that they know they're welcome, and that they know they're safe. And that can be the first moment of, am I safe or not safe in this human experience, is the moment you're born.
Mm.
And birth is such a surrender. And I do feel really lucky that I had two very perfect births. And I know that's not the case for all women, but there's so much we can do, no matter what the birth is like, to continue nurturing that for our babies, that feeling of safety and that feeling of being welcome. So Lily, again, I had a very smooth pregnancy. It was very intense. It was a very intense year for me and my partner, and, my son too, I had been living in Bali for 7 years. We decided to leave Bali. We moved to Hawaii and it didn't work. And then we moved to California, and it was just a really big year while I was pregnant, of just a lot of moving physically and a lot of life shifting and a lot of like adulting, really like big adulting, and like financial stress, and like not knowing where we're living, and da 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 is like very big in that way. But the pregnancy itself was, again, very smooth. And I was really grateful for that. And I was really deeply committed to my movement. And I wasn't in a place where I could go to ecstatic dance twice a week. We were moving around a lot and changing location. But I really rooted deeper into my mana movement practice. And mana movement was practice I had developed during that time after my son was born. And it was like, it became my go-to, just daily practice, because it was meditation, it was, physical activation, it got my body moving, and it really connected me with my energy body. And so that's been my go-to practice. And while I was pregnant, that really like was my anchor back into my body, even through all of the chaos of what was happening in life around us and all of the instability. I'd say that was a big thing. There was so much instability, so much unknown in, our physical life that I really needed to root deeper into that inner anchor, that inner stability. So it was a big year or a big 9 months,
It sounds like it.
but we finally landed where had chosen to give birth, which is in the foothills of the Sierra Mountains in California, and just felt like actually baby, she really, helped guide us here of just being held by the mountains and the forest and just having that energy. And found an amazing midwife who was really on board with, being hands off and letting us do it ourselves and just kind of being that beautiful space holder. And the birth was very smooth and beautiful. And I did have a moment during it where I was like, I do not remember this being so intense. Was it this intense last time? Like this whole birth amnesia is a real thing, so that
It
you do.
is.
But it was so cool to have another opportunity to just go deeper into my practice. And it was very similar. The labor was a bit shorter, but I sat on the couch and just had my eyes closed and toned, and my partner just was by my side the whole time, holding my feet and just listening to my body. And I got in the tub at one point and realized I wasn't ready and got out and got in the bed. And yeah, again, just really, really listening to the body. And it was interesting because, like I said, that pregnancy, there was a lot more work mentally with the fears that were coming up. And it came up a couple times during the end of the labor process where that fear started to creep in of no, taking too long, like it shouldn't take this long, like is something wrong? And really having to, in the moment, also work with those voices and come back to the body, come back to the body. And that was the main thing of when I could feel that fear was starting to run in my mind, was just bringing my focus back down to the body, feeling the body, listening, trusting the body, and just really doing that work. And my ability to do that was based on all of the work I had done before that. Because that's such a big piece of the movement practices of Mana movement, is just keep coming back to the body. You start thinking about your laundry list, you start thinking about all the other things you have to do that day, just come back to the body, feel the fingers, feel the toes, feel the breath, and just that daily practice of sustained focus of the mind and bringing it back to the body. So that was a really important tool that really supported me in not just running that monkey mind of fear, which, once that happens, then the body starts to contract. If you get stuck in that fear, then the body's going to start to contract. And then that's when we start running into problems, because now we're affecting the physical body. So working with that piece. And it was another water birth and very smooth, just same experience when she came out, just the highest amount of pure joy ever possible. And our little girl was here, and same thing, just slopped back onto the bed and didn't leave for 2 weeks. And the sweet thing about this birth was that our son was here, and I went into labor at like 11 p.m., so he was already asleep, and then she was born at 7:47 a.m. So he slept through most of it, but he woke up probably 30 minutes before she was born, pretty much when I started pushing. And he came into the room, the bedroom, and he was very shocked to see like a pool, and he was like, whoa, I went to bed, everything was normal, and I'm waking up to this. And I could feel that my body was waiting for him. Like as soon as he came in the room and I knew he was there, like that was when the pushing started. And I could feel that my body was just waiting for him to be there, because I kept thinking like, is he going to wake up? What's going on with him? And that was pulling me out of really being able to finish the process. So he was there in the room. He got to watch his sister being born. And I had prepped him of, mama's going to be making a lot of noises and it might be kind of scary, but just know everything's okay. And so he was kind of prepared for that in a way. And he was right there during the birth and then schlopped onto the bed with us and we all just cuddled on bed, super happy that baby was born. And yeah, it was very, very beautiful experience. Very beautiful.
Mm. That's so beautiful to hear. When you said that my body was waiting for him to walk in the room, like teary-eyed from that. That's so beautiful, and it's so rare for siblings to see their siblings being born in our culture, but that's how we understand what a normal birth looks like and not what we see in the media. It can be an emergency, that is the case sometimes, but it could also just be in mom and dad's bedroom
Yeah.
with some water, with a little birth pool, like that's how kids learn what's possible. So beautiful that your son got to experience that.
Absolutely. And also, again, it's creating the normal. People after that kept asking him, like, how was that to see your sister born? And he was just like, yeah, like he has no idea that that's not normal. And I remember we had one conversation about, giving birth in a hospital. He was like, oh, people give birth in the hospital? Like, he just didn't even know that that was like not normal to have that birth experience. And yeah, I just love that. I love that he has such a different perspective on what's normal and we get to create that absolutely for our kids.
Yeah. And it sounds like you just had like what we're talking about, like what our birthright is as women is to experience a satisfying, supported birth where the potential for feeling that level of like euphoria when that huge rush of oxytocin comes into our system, that final push. It's actually there's more oxytocin after we push out our baby than there is throughout the whole labor. And of course you're going to feel so bonded to this new life and to your partner. I remember I was going through a really difficult time with my partner when my second was born. And after that rush of oxytocin, I looked at him and I was like, oh, he's not so bad. Like it just bonds you with the people. Oxytocin is one hell of a drug. But I did want to talk about the Mana movement specifically. And from what I understand, it's spirals, waves. It's very like feminine movement, like the wave, the flowy energy. Can you give us, I guess, like a summary of what Mana movement is and how, like, you obviously found that it really prepared you well for birth?
Yeah, so it's based on just bringing nonlinear movement patterns into the whole body. And that's circles, spirals, and waves, which we also call the feminine pathways. Again, the masculine is the linear and the feminine is the nonlinear. And obviously, if you look in nature, you see these patterns everywhere, the circles and spirals and waves. And so understanding that one of the pathways to realigning ourselves with the feminine flow, with awakening the feminine, is through the physical body. If we physically move our body in spirals and circles, then that will also bring that movement into the energy body and allow the energy moving through us to start flowing more naturally. And again, we were talking about, emotional restriction and blockages. Well, this is what helps to release that when we can start allowing the energy to clear through these spirals, through the circles, through the waves, we start to unlock a lot of these blockages and the energy can flow through more clearly without restriction. And this is when we get into that experience of embodiment, right? So now the energy inside is clearly moving, flowing through, and able to circulate out into, the world around us and then back in and out. So we get into this sort of double torus feeling of how the energy moves in and out of the body with more clarity, with more fluidity, and without these stagnations. The practice is quite simple, and the intention with the practice was to make it accessible for anyone. You don't have to be a dancer. You don't have to have any movement experience. It's very simple. It's guided. The movement patterns that I'm guiding you in are very simple. Anyone can understand them. It can be done for men, women, young, old. You don't have to have like an intense physical capacity to be able to do this. And it really bridges this holistic well-being where it's not just a movement practice. It will activate your body physically, but it's also meditation. And again, it's that skill of continuing to bring your focus back to feeling body awareness, to quiet the mind. And it also supports the spiritual liberation of clearing stagnant energy, of connecting you with your creativity and your fluidity and pleasure, and just allowing that to move through. So for me, it's become what I call an all-in-one, right? It's like the meditation, it's the physical activation, and it's that spiritual liberation. And my hope in creating it is that, again, I can help anyone that's interested in using that tool for their own journey to be able to access it, where they don't have to have 30 years of technical dance training to be able to have the results and have the experience that I've had with the movement medicine. That was the intention, and it's birthed very organically. I just keep following these curiosities and just doing it for myself first of, does that work? How does that feel? How does this feel to have this as my own practice? And then offering that to everyone else. And the response for that practice has really been incredible. There are a lot of women who, you know, reach out and they're like, this is literally what I've been looking for my whole life, but I didn't even know it. And I think the power in it is in this simplicity.
Mm.
It's in that invitation to slow down, to be with our body, to have that focus, and to do something that feels really nurturing, where we're not pushing ourselves, or not in this like drive of it has to be perfect and it has to be this way and it has to be disciplined. It's really giving ourselves that compassion and that softness so that we can build that trust and that safety in ourselves and our body. And so that was a practice that I used, through the pregnancy. I used actually during this birth, I did do some spiraling.
There you go. There you go.
I really was like using that concept during it. And a big piece of why I was doing the movement was actually to get out of my head in those moments where I was starting to go into fear. I was like, I just need to like really get into the physical body. And so I was using that. And then after she was born, during the postpartum recovery, I was practicing and it was different. It was more gentle. It was very slow, but I was really using it to just help that healing process also because it brings a lot of attention down to the womb and the pelvis and just really nourishing that space and also keeping the body open because you find yourself in these like really awkward positions after your baby's born, trying to
Mhm.
breastfeed and like sleep sitting up and your head's all kinked. And so using that practice also to just keep the body open and soft and fluid to support that healing process.
Mm. That's so beautiful. And it reminds me, as you were talking, I was thinking of what I've discussed with people before. Like our body is a technology. And by activating with these feminine movements, we're activating it in our own life, but also it's like we're a microcosm of what's happening on the macrocosm scale, like what we see out in the world. As we do this, as women get more in touch with this, as men get more in touch with the feminine aspect of themselves, we're going to see that balance again happen in the world because as you said at the very beginning of this podcast, we live in a very masculine society and culture. And so movements like this that bring more pleasure and fluidity into our lives, into our body, are actually what is going to shift things. Our body is the technology that's going to initiate that on the collective level. And I think sometimes we lose sight of it because we're so much in our head and in our intellect and in our logical brain because it really doesn't make sense from a logical perspective. But we're meant as human beings to experience pleasure and euphoria and ecstasy. Like birth is meant to be, sure, an intense experience, but we are meant to experience that euphoric experience, that bonding with our baby afterwards. That's what the design of the human body is. And practices like mana movement are getting us in touch with that. So thank you for your work. Thank you for bringing that out into the world and just being guided by your body, by your curiosity. And that's what it birthed.
Oh,
What a beautiful thing.
thank you.
In your description, you were talking about feeling empowered and in agency over your body and in your birth. When you say in agency, can you just give a short summary?
So, agency is just our experience to feel in control over our life. And I think it's something that a lot of people don't feel. We don't feel in control over our body. We feel disconnected from our body. We don't feel in control over, what's happening in our life. And we feel kind of like we're just getting tossed around in the washing machine a lot of the times. And it doesn't have to be the case. And I think that it's really a choice of taking back our power, taking back our agency over our life. And that really starts with the body. Everything we've been talking about, the importance of reconnecting with the physical body to nurture a sense of inner safety, to nurture a sense of inner freedom, to really nurture that trust in the physical body so that we feel that we have first agency over our own body, right? I know how I'm moving through space. I know how my body can move through space. I know where it is in space. And even our emotions, like I can welcome my emotions. I feel safe in them. I have the tools. I know how to express them in a healthy way, of not feeling like we're just at the whim of whatever emotional like chaos wants to move through us, but really feeling that we are the master creators and we have the tools to be able to guide our own body and our own energy at every moment. And then that extends from there, right? And from there, then we can feel more agency of our life. I know how to move through the world. I can make the choice of how I flow, of what I move towards and what I move away, and what I'm manifesting through that experience of being embodied. And so I think a big piece is just really believing that we are the master creators of our life and just like taking that leadership and then aligning all of our actions, all of our movements, all of our choices with what we want to be experiencing more pleasure, more expansion, more just aliveness. And the thing about aliveness is it goes both directions, right? We have to be willing to feel the deeper things, the more intense things, if we want to also feel the higher things. Just like you were saying in the birth experience, we have to be willing to embrace the intensity in order to also experience that euphoria and that ecstasy. It's one full package. Really cultivating the skills to feel safe in the intensity of life and the emotions.
So well said. Because sometimes we don't even feel safe feeling good emotions. So feeling safe, feeling the darkness, and feeling safe, feeling the quote unquote light, positive emotions as well. That leads me to my second last question, Mana. I saw your post because this is the year of the snake in the Chinese zodiac, and I saw your post, and I was like, they're so strong right now. And it was happening for me like 6 months ago. I had my first, I want to say medicine journey, but I think for a lot of people, that's a positive connotation. Not all people need to have a medicine journey with psychedelics or whatever. But I had a very positive experience, and the theme of the snake was so powerful. And just this shedding of the skin, shedding of what no longer serves us, and that kind of being our superpower. But you kind of train women in your retreats to go into different animals. Is that right?
It is part of it. It's some of the practices. And, the idea of that is it's a way to give ourselves more permission. if we're exploring the fierceness through the embodiment of a jaguar, then a lot of times people kind of give themselves more of a permission slip to express it in a raw way than if it's
Mm.
just like coming through in our humanness. So animals, yeah, animal embodiment is a powerful tool that we use.
Yeah. The last question that I'll ask, which I like to ask all of my guests, is because of what you actually touched upon many times. How are we welcoming this new life? Whose hands are the first hands to touch our baby? This is the profound imprint. And ideally, it is an imprint of love and safety and trust, as you mentioned several times throughout this podcast. Sometimes that's not what happens. Sometimes we are imprinting our babies with survival mode and a lack of trust and a lack of safety. And that's okay. It's not permanent. We can do a lot of things to repair that in the postpartum period. But with that being said, what would you like to imprint onto the listeners? So it's a lot of moms preparing for birth, it's a lot of new parents, it's also entrepreneurial women who want to birth something beautiful into this world. What would you like to imprint onto those ears?
To be honest, the first first thing that comes to me is a regulated nervous system.
If we could just imprint that onto everyone, the world would be so different.
Which, for everything we've talked about today, if we look at it from a somatic therapy lens, is what we're talking about. We're talking about how to learn how to self-regulate our nervous system. This idea of not squeezing when things get intense, being open, staying open and peaceful. This is all related to the nervous system. And if we're looking at the first imprints on a baby, they are literally learning how to regulate their nervous system off of our nervous system when we're holding them. And so the very, very absolute best thing we can do for them is to work on regulating our own nervous system. And for any woman, whether you're a mother, whether you're an entrepreneur, if you're giving birth, whatever stage you're at, the more that we can, again, feel in control over our nervous system, over when we get too frazzled or when we get depressed, or, learning how to really keep ourselves in balance and inner harmony. This supports us in everything we're trying to birth and create into the world. When we're birthing a business or, a piece of art, there's so much that goes into that can drain us, that can be exhausting, that can throw us off. And to know how to bring ourselves back to a place of peace and harmony, no matter what is happening, is the absolute greatest tool that we can give ourselves, the greatest gift we can give ourselves.
Could not agree more. Biggest gift for ourselves and for our children.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, Mana, thank you so much. Seriously, seriously, this has been one of the most enlightening conversations. So validating for what I'm learning constantly, what I see with my patients, and my hopes for women throughout their birth experience, no matter how that unfolds. If people want to get in touch with you, if they want to learn more, how can they do that?
They can go to my website, which is moname.com. They can also message me on Instagram, which is moname_movement. There's a lot of different ways that people can access this work, and that's also been one of my goals, is to make it really accessible. So I have a YouTube channel with short practices on it. I actually do have a Mana Movement maternity program specifically for women who are getting prepared to give birth that I recorded when I was pregnant. So I've got the belly there too. And yeah, I'd say for anyone listening who is sparked with curiosity, just try it out. We can talk about embodiment until we're blue in the face, but the only way to really understand it is to do it, is to feel it in your own body. And then you have that aha moment. Oh, okay, this is what it feels like. This is what's possible. So try it. Just try it out.
You have to really, really feel it on a visceral level. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you so much. And I will put all of those in the show notes for people so they can easily connect with you. And I hope that they get sparked with that curiosity and see what it's all about in their own system, in their own nervous system, in their own body. And then they contribute to our social nervous system. Because being around someone who is emotionally regulated is so soothing. It is
Mhm.
contagious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you for this opportunity. It's such a joy to talk about these things. And yeah, I really hope this inspires so many women around the world to just connect deeper with themselves and, yeah, support our next generation as well.
absolutely. Thank you, Mana.